fantasy managers, it's up to us to decipher the fallout and how things are going to play out as a result of these changes. How are coaching changes going to affect the deployment of certain players, and how are new personnel or players on teams going to affect the overall performance? We're going to get into that and more on the Chicago Bears in just a second. Welcome back to the IDP Plus podcast. I'm your host, as always, on this series. My name is Axton Harding, and you can find me on Twitter at AxmanIDP. In this journey, we've been kind of going through the NFL team by team and just kind of getting a lay of the land, top to bottom. Coaching changes, offensive line changes, the fallout from all of this. What can we expect? Compared to last year, what can we expect moving forward, and just kind of the fallout of all the different looks of all these NFL teams. And today we're going into the Chicago Bears. So let's go ahead and start off with the coaching changes. For the Bears, we've got a new head coach in Ben Johnson from the Detroit Lions, was formerly the offensive coordinator over there. Now we've got a new defensive coordinator in Dennis Allen, the former head coach of the New Orleans Saints. I would also mention if there were any changes on the offensive side of the ball, but Ben Johnson's pretty much going to take over calling plays on the offensive side. So I'm not really too worried about that person, because the offensive coordinator is ultimately just going to deploy Ben Johnson's will. So what does a Ben Johnson kind of offense look like? Well, you can kind of take a look at the Detroit Lions last year and get kind of a feel for how he likes to deploy his weapons. And he's got just as many weapons on the Chicago team. We're just got a different look to it. We've got a lot of first-round talent and a lot of upside, but a lot of unproven talent at the same time. So I think Ben Johnson could have some fun with this Chicago Bears team. In 2024, the Lions under Ben Johnson were middling of the NFL in terms of overall pass attempts, but they were top 5 in yards and touchdowns, so they were a very efficient offense. And Ben Johnson has historically operated very efficient offense. So the fact that we were getting attempts that are kind of middle of the league and getting results that end up in the top of the league is very, very good outlook for this offense. They were specifically top 5 in rush attempts as well, and top 6 in rushing yards, 3rd in touchdowns. So a heavy dose of rushing I think we can expect for the Chicago Bears this year. I think Ben Johnson likes to operate his offense through the running game. We'll just kind of see what that looks like, because obviously he's had Jahmyr Gibbs and David Montgomery in the past, and now we kind of have quite a lesser version of that duo. So I'm not entirely sure he's going to just completely trust the run like he would have otherwise with Jahmyr Gibbs and David Montgomery, but I do think that he's going to use it in order to open up the pass game a little bit, because last year, Caleb Johnson being one of the most sacked quarterbacks, Ben Johnson's going to want to do something to kind of shake it up and get defenses looking at something other than Caleb Johnson, because defenses were just coming after him last year. So I think we can expect a more healthy balance. I don't think he'll go near as run heavy, but like I said, he's going to want to operate this offense based off of the rushing game, and I think Roschon Johnson kind of gets involved a little bit more here too, and we'll talk about that here in just a second. So I do think you can probably expect a little more balanced approach in terms of overall attempts for the Chicago Bears team, but it's probably going to be leaned on the run a little bit. So we'll just kind of have to see what that looks like. But I think that's kind of something we can pretty well expect, judging by the history of Ben Johnson. Now, Dennis Allen, on the other hand, defensive coordinator for the Chicago Bears, coming from the Saints. The Saints were never really a rotational-esque kind of defense. You never really. There were a few guys that were pretty reliable for IDP throughout the years. Mario Davis has been an outstanding linebacker. We've seen a number of defensive linemen and defensive backs come from New Orleans under Dennis Allen as well. So I think that's something we can look forward to on the defense. There's less rotation, more full-time players, and as a result, we can get some more reliable production as well out of Chicago Bears. So I kind of like this for just a whole revamp of coaching personnel for the Chicago Bears. And, they were kind of middling in the overall defense last year. So I think Dennis Allen can kind of turn things around here and hold guys accountable. And I think we could see some bounce backs. We'll talk about that here in a sec. But offensive line, out of the coaching, we'll get an offensive line. The Chicago Bears have added Joe Tooney, Drew Dahlman, and Jonah Jackson. 3 solid overall graded blocking linemen. Joe Tooney was an 80 overall graded between pass and run blocking. Drew Dahlman was a 78 overall, and Jonah Jackson a 68 overall graded PFF graded by PFF. Offensive linemen. So we've definitely got an influx of talent here where we saw last year's unit pretty well allow Caleb Williams to get sacked the most times in the league. And that's not great. So, but also at the same time, just speaking to the level of play of Caleb Williams, the guy didn't throw too many, only threw like 6 interceptions. So pretty good speaking of your quarterback. But in terms of the offensive line, I think we can expect a lot more protection. And we're probably looking at near half the amount of sacks. Caleb took like 60 some sacks last year. I think we can see that drop down quite a bit this year. So judging by the fact that they were kind of a middling or bottom end offensive line overall, I think we can look at quite a bit of a jump from this offensive line and a lot better performance. Caleb Williams is going to have more time to throw the ball. Running backs are going to have more lanes to run through, and the wide receivers are going to have more time to get open just as a result of adding these 3 linemen. And get another year of chemistry under there. And I think this could be a pretty stout offensive line by the end of the season. So we'll just have to see how it plays out. But I think we can expect a lot more overall offensive efficiency. Let's get into the players. Let's talk about quarterbacks. Caleb Williams specifically. I'll actually get in here and share my screen, and I'll show you guys in just a second what we're going to get into. I like to use Ourlads. Ourlads is a depth chart website that is a pretty reliable one. They always keep it up to date and pretty accurate. So here, just take a look here with me, and you guys can kind of walk through the depth chart with me, and we'll just kind of evaluate this as we go. So Caleb Williams, quarterback room looks pretty well the same as last year. Obviously, I'm not really worried about anybody behind Caleb Williams. I think Caleb Williams having finished as quarterback 16 last year, I think we got some room for him to jump. He could probably jump into the overall top 12 quarterbacks, but right now his values pretty well remain the same as when you drafted him last year. People aren't really excited, haven't really bumped him up just because we haven't seen it on the field so far, but he's still got that first overall pick background to him, so he's still kind of being propped up a little bit. He's not going to just fall off, but he's the kind of guy that I think you're going to get as maybe a middle of the road quarterback 2, maybe a high end quarterback 2. You're not going to have to go get him as your QB1. You will probably be able to get him as a quarterback 2 in Superflex leagues or a depth quarterback in 1 quarterback leagues with quarterback 1 upside, in my opinion. Because like I always say, after, at least for this year, after like quarterback 8, there's just a whole bunch of guys that could really finish in the last 4 of the top 12 quarterbacks, in my opinion, the way I see it. So Caleb Williams is definitely one of these guys that I think could jump up and be a quarterback 1. And if you wanted to jump in and scoop up the value, I guess there's not really a whole lot of value to extract, but just the fact that his value hasn't risen yet, like a guy like Jaden Daniels, who's just impossible to obtain right now, was in the same draft class. And just because he had a different look to his season, people are going to value him quite a bit different. So should Caleb Williams have a very successful season, be able to take a massive step forward from a year ago, and we can actually even get into some of the stats here. Should he be able to surpass 4,000 yards, get more like 30 touchdowns, keep his interceptions kind of low? I don't see why Caleb Williams couldn't jump up and be a top 5 dynasty asset. And that's not unrealistic. I would say Jaden Daniels is easily being valued that way, and Caleb Williams is the first overall pick. Should he have the season that we would expect from a first overall pick? Yeah, I think it's very possible that in Dynasty he could be easily worth a couple of first-round draft picks. So the fact that you can get him for a single one right now, yeah, there's going to be a little bit of return on investment just because he hasn't popped yet. So the window, if there was one to buy, I guess for Caleb Williams, it would be now, because I would imagine by the end of the season this guy's going to be pretty hard to acquire in Dynasty. Now in season-long leagues, I think I'm not sure if it's going to be right out of the gate. There might be some things that this team has to work out, so stay patient to start the season because there's going to have to be some chemistry, because, yeah, these guys have played with each other for a year or so in terms of DJ Moore, Roma Dunze, DeAndre Swift, and Caleb. But it's a new scheme, so everything's kind of got to mesh, and they've got to know where people are going to be at certain points on any given place. So, stay patient to start the season, but by the end of the year, I think this team will be humming, and I like Caleb Williams to bump up that value from around quarterback 16 to something more like quarterback 12 or the back end of the quarterback 1s. So I like some Caleb Williams this year. Now let's get into more of the depth chart, where we're going to talk about some running backs. DeAndre Swift and Roschon Johnson, I think, are the guys that we want to focus on here. Kyle Monangai is more like a dynasty stash. In case of emergency, he's really not going to get a whole lot of playing time behind Roschon Johnson and DeAndre Swift unless one of them has a catastrophic injury. So we're going to focus on Roschon Johnson and DeAndre Swift. Roschon Johnson, I think, is going to actually have some sort of a role. Like I mentioned earlier, Ben Johnson likes to run a split backfield of sorts. Of course, we saw David Montgomery and we saw Jahmyr Gibbs splitting touches. David Montgomery more of the grinder on the ground. Jahmyr Gibbs, the specialist through the air and kind of the big play specialist. So I think now we're kind of looking at the same thing. Roschon Johnson being a 6 foot, 225-pound bruising back, I think he's going to be the guy that grinds the middle of the field. DeAndre Swift is going to be the primary pass catcher. And I think we're going to see a little bit mix of both. DeAndre Swift is probably going to be like your Jahmyr Gibbs kind of player, so he's going to get a respectable amount of run. And honestly, I think there's some value here in both of these guys. Roschon Johnson is ultimately not even drafted, and I imagine I would say if Ben Johnson keeps history somewhat similar and runs somewhat of a committee, he's going to get 10 or more touches a game on the ground just as a baseline. So that right there already bumps him up about 5 or 6 rounds from where he even gets taken in fantasy leagues. So I do like some Roschon Johnson. I'm not going to go out and spend the house on him. Maybe if you can get him for like a third or maybe a couple thirds. Essentially, a third is like an 18% hit rate on your draft picks in dynasty leagues anyways. So maybe a couple of thirds if they're being really stingy. I don't know that I would go out and really acquire him for that. I'd probably look to get him for more like a third or like an add-in to a larger trade or something like that. But I do think that Roschon Johnson could get up there towards, I don't know, RB2, maybe back in RB3, back into RB2 numbers by the end of the season. So I think he's going to get plenty of work. He's going to be a guy that could have an opportunity around the goal line and be a third down back for a chain moving kind of guy. So I do like some Roschon Johnson this year. So I think there's some value right there. Also, I think DeAndre Swift being valued as a running back 27 right now. I just recently saw him go in a draft right at that point. Considering DeAndre Swift has never finished anything less than a running back 2, I think that we also have some value here to extract. Now, what that's going to look like, I'm not going to go out and say that he's going to perform like a Jahmyr Gibbs, but for Ben Johnson under a new scheme, I think especially with offensive line changes, I think DeAndre Swift could be looking at quite a bit better efficiency. He's kind of made a living in the passing game, and I think he could thrive as well as Caleb kind of gets used to the new offensive line and the new scheme under Ben Johnson. Maybe DeAndre Swift is kind of that safety valve for him out of the backfield. So RB 27, like I mentioned, is kind of when he goes off the board in your drafts. So I think there's going to be some value there. And if you want to go out and trade for a guy like this, maybe a mid-second round pick could get it done. And I think DeAndre Swift is going to do fine for you. I think if you can get an RB2 for a second round pick, you're doing pretty good. So, there is some value there for both these running backs to kind of make a sizable jump in kind of where they're valued right now. I didn't even waste time to go and look where Roschon Johnson is being valued, but I would imagine RB 30s or so, very late RB 3, 4, if that. So I often find him just following me all the time. I'm not out here looking to, go up and reach for him or anything. He just always kind of falls through the cracks. So, like I said, there could be a definite value boost in this backfield for Chicago. So now let's jump into the pass catchers. And, actually, let's just kind of go back. Just take a look at some DeAndre Swift real quick before we get into the pass catchers, guys. I'm sorry. So take a look here. Just look at the kind of finish. We're looking at a guy who's always heavily involved in the passing game. I'd like to see him get catches over 50 catches or so, especially if they're going to run a split backfield. That would make me feel really comfortable with a guy like DeAndre Swift. But nonetheless, I think we're, especially the last couple of years, haven't cracked 1,000 yards, almost 2 years in a row. Never having finished outside the top 24. I like this outlook for DeAndre Swift. If we can expect the offense to run better overall due to these coaching and offensive line changes, DeAndre Swift is going to be a beneficiary of that, and he's honestly finished every year except for 2021 within a range of about 3 running back positions overall. So if there was anything that was going to look up, you would have thought that DeAndre Swift in Philly would have been that year, but also he's not quite Saquon Barkley. They didn't really change the scheme like they did for Saquon. If there was ever a year that was going to do it, I think this is going to be the year that DeAndre Swift can kind of break through that running back 18, 19 kind of ceiling that he's kind of placed for himself. Trying to think about how that was going to play out in my head, but I think that DeAndre Swift could be more like a higher end running back 2 here, maybe kind of finish in the early teens. So I do like the running backs. All right. Now we're getting into the pass catchers. Still got DJ Moore, still got Roma Dunze. They've added all nine Zacchaeus, as you can see. Luther Burden via the draft, Evan Duvernay from Jacksonville in the offseason. And I mean, beyond that, I'm not really even half of those guys. I'm not even really worried. Zacchaeus and Duvernay, pretty well mark them off your board. I'm not even taking dart throws on guys like that. But Luther Burden, maybe late if he falls extremely late. I've heard a lot of comps to a Debo Samuel. I've also heard a lot of things about him not wanting to participate if he knows he's not going to get the ball. If you're not going to be able to, if you're not going to participate and give your effort on every play, you're not going to get on the field. And that's how a lot of people make their way and open that pathway for them to become fantasy relevant, is by being a good pass blocker and finding ways to get on the field other than just outperforming everyone else. Luther Burden seems like the kind of player that's probably going to need to be a grinder in order to get more playing time, unless he's just going to end up being in specific packages. And at that point, I'm not really too keen on going out and getting a guy like Luther Burden, where everyone's pretty interested in Luther Burden. Everybody really likes the Chicago Bears overall, but Luther Burden always seems to kind of go earlier than I feel comfortable picking him. So being a rookie in season-long leagues, I'm not touching a rookie like Luther Burden. So in season leagues now for Dynasty, if you spent your late first-round draft pick on him, then you're probably going to have to be patient, because there's a lot of first-round solid talent ahead of him, and I don't think that he's going to have quite the kind of role that a lot of people are drafting and expecting out of him, just due to the amount of playmakers that they have already on the team ahead of him. And it's not like he was a top 10 talent that's just going to come out and wow everyone. So we'll stay patient on Luther Burden. Maybe carves out a role here or something like that in this offense. Ben Johnson's very creative. He can get like guys like this involved. I just don't have I'm not going to hold my breath, and I'm not going to hold my hopes very high for this season anyway. So now let's talk about some Roma Dunze, a guy much like Caleb Williams who's kind of plateaued. It's not really fallen. It's not really risen. So again, if there was going to be a guy that you felt really good about, whose value was going to increase this year, who I believe that it will, just because Keenan Allen's out of the door, there's a lot of vacated passes. There's, obviously Caleb's going to have a lot more time to throw the ball. He's going to have more time to get open. So I think Roma Dunze could go from a middling wide receiver 2 type to, in terms of value, he could make it to the quarterback 1 overall rankings, and not a quarterback, wide receiver 1, like top 12 wide receiver. So I think that's definitely in the realm of possibilities, especially considering his age. He could probably bump out some old guys in dynasty rankings by the end of the season, but for now he's going to kind of remain a wide receiver 2. So if there was a time to go in and get some Roma Dunze, it's probably now. And that sounds funny, because I'm actually in talks to get rid of Roma Dunze for a competitive team, who I'm actually just looking to kind of add some more depth personally, in terms of my flex position, give me some more immediate return. I'm kind of talking to a couple of guys about Roma Dunze right now. So, it might sound a little kind of counterintuitive, I guess, if I'm telling you guys that Roma Dunze might have some value and increase in value, but then I'm going to sell. But it's a very particular situation, because this is a rebuild turning right into a contender, and I just need some guys that I know for a fact are going to put points on the board right now and add to my depth and starting lineup. And I do have some depth, a lot of young guys that I can kind of supplant Rome with as well. So I'm kind of making a tactical decision there to maybe shop him and see what I can get. Maybe some Alvin Kamara type numbers, and then a plus on top of that. So there's a lot of options out there as well, but I'm just looking more to maximize my fantasy production on this and take a hit in the overall value. But that's my personal opinion on that. I just wanted to explain kind of my situation with this. I'm not going to go out and advertise. Personally, I know it's not selling high. So if you're into that and you want to sell at the most optimal time, now is not the time to sell Roma Dunze. I'm just in a very particular situation, and I feel like I need to capitalize on and turn this player value into more fantasy production value. At least with this squad that I have. So won't go too much into that anymore. So but I do like for Roma Dunze to be somewhat of a value at this point. Not that he's fallen, but again, his value hasn't risen yet, and by the end of the season, it's going to be a lot more expensive to acquire him than a late or mid first round pick. You probably have to pay up. So if you're going to buy a Roma Dunze, now is the time to do it. DJ Moore, honestly, I think is a better value as well. Being 28 years old, I think that's going to drop him quite a bit. So he's looking more like a solid late first round pick or early second plus a little something to get a guy like DJ Moore. I saw him go for David Montgomery straight up, and a lot of people are down on David Montgomery's value overall. So if you can give up a guy like David Montgomery for a guy with like DJ Moore with the kind of upside that we've seen him finish as a wide receiver 6, and we'll even get into some of his stats here. Let's get into more. It's weird they don't put the periods in there, so it kind of messes with me. Anyways, wide receiver 6, we've seen him finish as a wide receiver 2 his entire career, except for year 1. And the 1 year where he finished as a wide receiver 1. And with things looking up from his wide receiver 16 finish a year ago, he's a primary pass catcher. We're looking at a guy who had 140 targets, 98 catches. We can see the catches jump up over 100 pretty easily. I'd say he's looking at more like 1,200 yards or so, where he was kind of flirting with that for much of his career. I think he gets back to that this year. I think we can expect quite a bit more efficiency from him. And as a result, I think he can bump that wide receiver 16 to more like a wide receiver 12 or even crack the top 10 if things go absolutely right and he remains that top pass catcher. But I think the only caveat is just being the amount of playmakers this team has. Will he be as consistent? I would have to imagine so. If we go look at his games from last year, let's just see what we were. Yeah, I mean, we're looking at flirting with 8 to 10 targets for the most part. Pretty consistent play overall, just not, well, then it kind of drops down. Yeah, I would say, I don't know, he's not breaking the mold or anything. I would have to see quite a few. Let's see, Rome Odunze had a couple of 100-yard receiving games, and so did DJ Moore. DJ Moore didn't exactly light the world on fire, but that's because Caleb Williams was running for his life. So the fact that he even finished at quarterback 16 with what we're seeing here, I think the target share being consistent is what we want to pay attention to most, just because, again, Caleb Williams running for his life, we can expect the receptions to be inconsistent there, just depending on the game and the matchup. So I think we will see this reception total kind of consolidate a little bit more. There will be a little less fluctuation. We just have to see exactly what that looks like, and the yardage is a little concerning to me, just because they've added so much talent. But nonetheless, I just because of the overall efficiency, we can expect all of this to come up. It's just kind of what does this consistency look like? I'd like for him to set that floor at like 50 yards and go from there. So I do think there's a lot of value to extract from a DJ Moore. He's a guy who's going to be valued as like a middling wide receiver 2, or not, probably a back end, more like a wide receiver 24-ish, and he's got wide receiver 6 upside should things go completely right. I'm not going to go lock in a wide receiver 6 finish, but he could definitely flirt with wide receiver 1 numbers and crack the top 12 pretty easily with the kind of changes that they've made here. And if you can get him for a David Montgomery type player or a late first, early second round pick, I like that value for a guy like DJ Moore. So let's get back to the depth chart. Going to tight ends, we're not going to spend a whole lot of time on tight ends because I'm not super excited about them for this year. Colson Loveland, the first round draft pick, is probably going to take some time to adjust, and we're just going to have to see what his role is going to look like with Rome Odunze, DJ Moore, Luther Burden, and the kind of jumps we're expecting from everyone else. I think we're going to have to temper expectations with a guy like Colson Loveland for this year because a lot of people are super high on him, and although the talent is there and he will be on the field plenty, I just don't know what that role is going to look like and how much we're going to be able to rely on it. So maybe you want to take a shot on a guy like this in your season-long leagues as a tight end 2 with maybe tight end 1 upside should things go right. I like that play, but drafting him as your tight end 1 is not advisable. I would not be doing anything like that. So, Cole Kmet should have somewhat of a role as well, but I think the kind of moves that they've made ultimately kills Cole Kmet's value with it, which is kind of tragic. A lot of people were Cole Kmet stands. So. But nonetheless, in terms of overall dynasty value, I don't think Cole Kmet's going to have much. I think he's pretty well done in terms of dynasty, unless he can find a role elsewhere that just has less competition for fantasy production. But Colson Loveland, definitely a good guy. You probably spent a first round or second round draft pick on, and he's a guy that I think, again, if you drafted him to be your top guy, you're probably going to be disappointed. But if he's a guy that you're putting behind a more veteran kind of player, set him on your taxi, just be patient, see how this year's going to play out. Don't feel bad for keeping him on the taxi squad if he's putting up 8 points or so a game, but you don't really feel like putting him in there over your stud. Don't you be patient? It just kind of depends on the makeup of your team. If you absolutely need him, I kind of feel bad because you're going to get some inconsistency just because of rookies getting used to the NFL. So I think we just need to temper expectations right out of the gate for a guy like this, considering the makeup of this team and how look that we're kind of expecting. So remain patient on Colson Loveland. I think maybe beyond this year when he gets some chemistry with Caleb and gets used to the system, maybe he develops more of a role, but we'll kind of see. So I think we're just going to have to be patient on Colson Loveland for now, but good outlooks ahead. Anyways, all right, before we get into the rest of the show, I just want to talk a little bit about the Fantasy Football Consistency Guide. Go to Amazon.com, get Bob Lung's Fantasy Football Consistency Guide for 2025 for a measly $15. Gives you a different look and perspective on the game of fantasy football, the game we all know and love, from a consistency kind of perspective, and ranking players accordingly, blurbs, and all that jazz. So go check it out. Again, Amazon.com, 2025 Fantasy Football Consistency Guide, and get it for $15 today. All right, let's jump back into the rest of this team. If we're going to talk about the defensive side of the ball now, so let's get into this. They did make some moves to kind of improve this defensive line from last year. Montez Sweat was about the only kind of playmaker that they really had on the defensive front. So now they add Grady Jarrett from the Atlanta Falcons. He did have a year or so as a waiver wire darling in fantasy football IDP leagues. He could be a guy that could hold some decent value for defensive tackle required leagues. But I'm not really going to go act like I'm super excited about a guy like Grady Jarrett in this kind of defense on the defensive interior. But he does add some veteran presence that's going to take eyes off of a guy like Montez Sweat, who does have the kind of upside that we like to see in IDP. They also added Dayo Odengbo to the edge group from Indianapolis. The Indianapolis edge group is an outstanding one, and Dayo has always held a significant role at 65% of snaps. And let's actually even get into here. Share my screen. Let's see. Let's go to the team snap count tool here in just a second, because I want to show you guys some of the tools on the website, kind of advocate for some of that. But anyways, getting into the defensive line room, I think adding Grady Jarrett and Dayo Odengbo is going to be outstanding for Montez Sweat. That's kind of what I'm getting to here is Dayo Odengbo. I think honestly Grady Jarrett and Dayo probably do increase the value from where they've been. They're not super exciting players. Dayo has like an 8 sack upside and like a 2 sack floor. So I'm not super excited to go out and acquire a guy like Dayo unless you're in a super deep league and he's sitting out there on waivers and you just need some depth. Same with a guy like Grady Jarrett. He probably holds a lot more value in your defensive tackle required leagues, as I mentioned a little bit ago. But I really want to focus on Montez Sweat because Montez Sweat is a guy who has shown us on the field to have 12 sack upside. Even a year ago, he was probably going in the 2nd to 3rd round of IDP drafts, IDP only drafts. He's one of the top 12 to 16 edge rushers off the board. I just finished a 24 round redraft mock with IDP, and he was taken in the 24th round. Montez Sweat is right now, and I think with these kind of improvements to the defensive line and the fact that we can expect a better unit overall, I think that Montez Sweat is going to have eyes taken off of him. I think he's going to benefit as a result. He's going to have more time to get to the quarterback. He's going to have different lanes open up for him now that attention is going to be elsewhere as well. And maybe that bounce back or that step down from a year ago or so was enough to get offensive lines not really all that worried about Montez Sweat. So let's take a look at some of his stats historically. We've seen 7, 9, 8, 12 and a half sacks throughout his career. He's a guy who's also going to give us a 50 to 60 tackle floor if things go right. That's something I've touted historically on here. If you've been here before, that we like to see about a 50 to 60 tackle floor for our defensive linemen, and Montez Sweat is giving us just that. And I think that this season, considering the changes that we're looking at here and the kind of expectation that we have for this unit, I think, especially under Dennis Allen, I think Montez Sweat could feast, and I think he could get those sacks up to that double-digit range. And we could see those tackles come up as well. So I'm really excited about a guy like Montez Sweat. Actually, both Sweat brothers. But Montez Sweat specifically for the Bears, obviously, I think he is an extreme value right now, going as a DL 4-5 type, and he's proven and put on the field DL2 upside. So I think Montez Sweat is a screaming value right now in your IDP drafts. And if you want to wait a little bit to grab some DL depth later on, I think Montez Sweat is an outstanding value right now. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about linebackers. Obviously, we have TJ Edwards and Tremaine Edmonds. And I also want to go back and I want to go into New Orleans and just look at and show you guys the kind of rotation and check out this team snap count tool as well. I had to blow up my screen a little bit so you guys could see some things better that I'm going to be sharing for much of the show. So here you may not have the names on the left side, but you can see snap counts broken down by week on the far right side. Actually over here, I guess, you'll get the average for the season. So also taking the fact if they miss any games, that's going to play into their average. So it's a little skewed if they miss some time, but nonetheless, I think we can still extract some value from the kind of week to week splits that we see. So under Dennis Allen, look, I was taking a look at this before the show as well. Defensive tackle, we're looking at full-time defensive, couple of full-time defensive tackles. Let's see, Brian Bresee, he plays his playmakers. Brian Bresee was seeing 61% of snaps, and then we saw two other guys creeping between 40 and 50%. Looks like there might have been some injuries as well to those other two guys, so I think there could have been some more to be had should guys have been healthy. Now, if we look at the defensive end, we're looking at a 70% of snaps in Carl Granderson, i.e. Montez Sweat. Chase Young was getting 63% of snaps, 2 full-time snaps. I think that's going to mean that Dio Odengbo is going to continue on at 65% of snap share that he's had historically, and Montez Sweat is also going to get a healthy dose of snaps as well. Let's just go back and well, here, before we get too far, linebacker 93, Mario Davis missed a game, so that knocked him down from 100. And also Pete Werner, they didn't really have a whole lot of talent behind Demario Davis. Now, if they're Caden Ellis popped in this defense under Dennis Allen, so he was a guy who kind of jumped on an opportunity. I think they're going to remain with TJ Edwards and Tremaine Edmonds. There's not a whole lot behind these guys. So nonetheless, I just want to kind of show you guys these team snap count. So let's actually even go in and just look at a guy like Montez Sweat's splits from last year, just under former head coaching. Montez Sweat, 57% of snaps. You guys just saw me look at two guys under Dennis Allen. Wow, really? I can't believe that. Montez Sweat, 57% of snaps. Missed one game. So it was probably more like 60, 65. Okay, so let's go take a look back at our New Orleans Saints and compare and contrast. Defensive end, 73. So even if he was at about 60% of snaps, we could still see a jump from Montez Sweat in terms of overall opportunity. And I think it just lends well to the idea that Montez Sweat is due for a bounce back season after putting up the 5.5 sacks and 32 tackles from a year ago. I think we can see those bump up to almost double. So I love Montez Sweat this year. He's a screaming value in your IDP drafts. All right. Now we'll get into linebackers. TJ Edwards. It's going to be pretty ho-hum. I'm not going to have a whole lot to say about the linebackers. TJ Edwards ought to be one of the top 5 or 6 linebackers off the board. He's going to be one of the most valuable ones out there because his role's not looking to change. Under Dennis Allen, he's going to love some TJ Edwards, throwing him in the middle and eating up all those runs. And I think we can expect more of what we've seen from TJ Edwards along the 150 tackle mark that he's kind of put up for himself for the last couple of season. I think we need to expect much more of the same. Now let's actually just think about Dennis Allen historically with Demario Davis. Demario Davis is historically under Dennis Allen been a pass rushing linebacker. Maybe we get some more upside for a guy like TJ Edwards. Just historically, let's see what he's put up on the sack department. I think he does get rushed actually a decent amount. Yeah, 4 sacks last year. I think we could look at something more like that again this year. And maybe he gets, okay, so he was 129 tackles last year. I think he can even bump that up. And maybe Dennis Allen wants to rush him at the passer as well, kind of a Demario Davis-esque kind of player. So I'm excited about a guy like TJ Edwards. I've been scooping him up. He's not necessarily a super screaming value right now, but he's a guy I think that's going to have a more than a solid floor among those top-end linebackers. So I love TJ Edwards as a linebacker 1 for your team. Set him and forget him. TJ will get it done. All right. So now Tremaine Edmonds, he's a guy who's more like a linebacker 4-5 type. I've never been a guy that's big on Tremaine Edmonds. Matter of fact, in our betting show last year, Johnny and I were consistently betting on his unders for tackles because he's not an overproducer. And if we even want to just kind of go in here and take a look at overall performances, we're looking at a guy with a 4-tackle floor, 2-tackle floor, just inconsistent play all over the board. And he doesn't even have the upside. He's got 10 tackle upside, but it's only twice in a year. I'm not really excited about a guy like that, especially because a lot of people are going to be drafting him as like a LB 3-4 type, and I see him as like an LB 5-6 type. I just think there's too many other guys I'd like to take dart throws on. Your Jack Sanborns, your Landon Roberts, your Keem Davis-Gaither, guys who I know are going to be in there for much more of those run stuffing snaps than a guy like Tremaine Edmonds, who's primarily in pass protection. As you can see from his interceptions, he's not going to get enough interceptions to make a difference on my end, personally. So, but he is getting about 100 tackles. He's got a decent floor in that regard. So if you need somebody late and he does fall to you, Tremaine Edmonds could be a guy who's going to put up his 100 tackles, maybe some splash play throughout the year. But the upside is pretty well capped at this 110 tackles a year. So I'm not super excited on a guy like Tremaine Edmonds. But that's kind of the linebacker room there. All right, now let's round it out and go into the defensive backs. I actually like the Chicago Bears defense. They've got Jaquan Brisker, Tyreek Stevenson. We've got Kevin Byard, Jalen Johnson, Kyler Gordon. And we'll get into some of this. I'm not a super savant. Go follow Johnny the Greek on Twitter. He is a guy who puts out an article every week during the season. He actually even has his week 1 projections for streaming cornerbacks and streaming defensive backs. If you are uncomfortable with the defensive back landscape, you can get a beat on anybody because it's so volatile and there's so many of them. He's a guy who I would follow. I think it's OrangeMan8286 on Twitter. Definitely look up Orangeman and be Johnny the Greek. So keep an eye on him. He will give out great advice every season. And he's got a 70% hit rate week to week, so he's definitely a guy who knows his stuff. But he's a guy who often puts in a guy like Tyreek Stevenson in plus matchups, or maybe even Jalen Johnson. I think something I've been hearing rumblings of, obviously, is Kyler Gordon here in the nickelback role. If he's going to play around the line of scrimmage a lot, I love this move for Kyler Gordon. I think he can be a sneaky value because most people in IDP are going to wait to draft defensive backs, and if you've got 3 that you need to start, it could be a guy you could get pretty dang late. And nickelback role, especially for guys that we've seen like Brian Branch and Tyke Smith, guys who played up near the line of scrimmage, it really produces for IDP. We get a lot more tackles because they're playing near the ball. Maybe we have some upside with some sacks as well. A guy like Melifonwu for Detroit last year had like 5 sacks in a few games. He came in late in the year and really popped. So Kyler Gordon's a vet, been in the league for years now. He's definitely been a good streamer for cornerbacks overall over the years and plus matchups. So if he gets in and plays around the line of scrimmage a lot more, I like this upside. So maybe a stash if you've got him or something like that. If you want to pick him up, you need some help on defensive backs, you can kind of look to pick him up, but I wouldn't go spend the farm on him. Obviously, I would no more than like a 4th, 5th round pick in your dynasty leagues, or if he's on waivers and you need help, definitely a guy you could, if you got the roster room, throw him on the bottom of your bench. But Kevin Byard is another one safety who's always been a producer at the position. I'll show you all what I'm talking about here, because Kevin Byard he's honestly year over year one of the top end producers at the safety position, and he's a guy who doesn't really get valued that way. So I always love to scoop up a guy like Kevin Byard, 31 years old. I don't even mind that because the defensive back position is so volatile. Next year I'll find someone on waiver and it doesn't even matter. And this happens every year where guys come out and just come out of nowhere and find themselves a role that you can just scoop up. So look at a guy like Kevin Byard. I'd much rather have Kevin Byard than even a Tremaine Edmonds. You guys were looking at the stats: a 2-tackle floor, and Kevin Byard's hit double-digit tackles in 4 games last year as a safety. So he's a guy who's just got a nose for the football. You can see as a defensive back getting 6 or 7 tackles a game. That's really. And then you throw in a sack, a forced fumble, interception. He's got pass deflections. I love a guy like Kevin Byard to kind of anchor your defensive back room. I don't even mind having him as a top defensive back on my team, just because, like I said, the defensive back position, there's a lot of 5 safety sets in the league. So that just adds more numbers to the defensive back room. And every year it's like a new top 10, a new top 10. You just try to pick through the weeds and find the guys who are finishing among kind of the top overall finishers every year. And Kevin Byard is one of these guys. So until he's done with the league, he's probably going to keep as a top end defensive back. And, he's going to be pretty reliable week in and week out, and you don't really have to worry about what weeks he's going to pop and when he's not. Then Tyreek Stevens, or Jaquan Brisker, I think he's going to have more upside as well this year. If we look at Jaquan Brisker's kind of history in the NFL, 100 tackle floor, big plays. He gets a lot of pass deflections and whatnot. I think Jaquan Brisker has historically kind of had that name value, and he gets drafted among the top end defensive backs, so there may not be a lot of value to extract here. But should he fall, or somebody just kind of be looking to get rid of him and pissed off because he was not playing last year, maybe there's a dip in value because of that. I think Jaquan Brisker should see quite a bounce back this year. I think he could have a career year this year in terms of overall tackles under Dennis Allen. So I do like Jaquan Brisker. I think this is the year we finally get to see that true upside in Jaquan Brisker if things go right. So, and I think that they honestly could, because Dennis Allen has made hay off of guys like Alontae Taylor and Hugo Madi for New Orleans. So, Jaquan Brisker, I think he's going to have a lot of fun with. So he's got 2 stud defensive backs, and I like both of these guys for IDP. So I think Jaquan Brisker has an arrow pointing up this season. Tyreek Stevenson and Jalen Johnson, the cornerbacks, are going to be more in pass-happy matchups that I really like them specifically. They're probably not going to give you a solid tackling floor. I'll even show you guys Tyreek Stevenson. Yeah, he's not going to have a solid tackling floor. He's going to be pretty inconsistent. But then there's those pass-happy matchups where they play an offense that throws the ball 30 or 40 times a game. Those are cornerbacks. Those are matchups that you like to throw a cornerback at in your starting lineup and try to get some points for a pass-happy matchup. So that's going to be all that I have today for the Chicago Bears. I hope you guys like what you saw. I hope you're able to extract some value from this. Let me know what you like, what you would like to see in the comments. It all helps the algorithm. Like, comment, subscribe. Turn on that notification bell, because I've got a lot more of these coming. And if you want to kind of follow me around the league and just kind of see what you want to hear more about other teams, tap that notification bell, and you'll get notified whenever the next one comes out. So until next time, thanks again, everybody, for watching. And I just wanted to remind everybody to go check out the website at idpplus.com. Consider a subscription. You guys saw the snap count tool. We've got an ADP tool now for redraft IDP. We've also got rankings, articles, videos. We've got a subscriber Discord. There's so much going on the website, and go check it out. And I hope you'll consider a subscription. So there's more to come, and you guys, I think, will be in for a treat this season. So again, thank you for watching, and we'll see you next time on the IDP Plus podcast.
Thank you for watching the IDP Plus YouTube network. If you enjoyed this video, give it a thumbs up, and don't forget to subscribe to our channel. Be sure to tap the bell icon to get notified whenever we upload new content.